Maria had been walking for 2 days straight. Her feet were covered in blisters and every step felt like walking on broken glass. The desert sun beat down on her head like a hammer, and the air was so hot it burned her lungs when she breathed. She looked around at the other people in her group. There were 12 of them when they started. Now she could only count 9. Where did the others go? She was too tired to think about it, too tired to worry. All she could think about was water and shade. The guide walked ahead of them, a young man who looked barely 20 years old. He kept checking his phone and looking nervous. Very nervous. Maria noticed his hands were shaking. When he took a sip from his water bottle, something wasn't right. Maria was 32 years old. Back home in Honduras, she used to sell vegetables in the market. She had 2 beautiful children waiting for her in Los Angeles. Her cousin was taking care of them. She hadn't seen their faces in 8 months. 8 long months of saving money, planning, and finally making this dangerous journey. Why did she leave? That question kept running through her mind as she stumbled over rocks and thorny bushes. She left because men with guns came to her house. They wanted money every week. Protection money, they called it. Her husband said no. He was a brave man, too brave. They shot him right in front of their house, right where their children played. After that, Maria knew she had to leave. The same men would come back. They always came back. So she sent her children ahead with her cousin. She stayed behind to sell everything they owned. The furniture, the cooking pots, even her wedding ring. Everything went to pay for this crossing. The smugglers promised her it would be easy. Just 2 days of walking, they said. Maybe 3 at most. There would be plenty of water. There would be food. There would be a van waiting on the other side. All lies. She knew that now. On the second day, everything changed. Maria heard a sound in the sky. She looked up and saw a helicopter. Not just one, but 2 of them. They were white with green stripes. Border Patrol. The guide suddenly started running. He didn't say a word. He just took off like a scared rabbit. Some of the others ran after him. Maria tried to run too, but her legs wouldn't work properly. She was too tired. Too weak from the heat and lack of water. 3 people stayed with her. An older woman named Rosa, a young man whose name she never learned, and a teenage boy who looked terrified. They hid under some bushes and waited. The helicopters circled for what felt like hours. The sound of the blades was so loud it made Maria's head hurt. When the helicopters finally left, it was almost dark. The guide never came back. Maria's water bottle was empty. She shook it, hoping maybe there was one more drop. Nothing. The older woman, Rosa, shared half of her remaining water. It was barely enough to wet their tongues. That night was the coldest night of Maria's life. People don't realize how cold the desert gets when the sun goes down. She shivered in her thin jacket, hugging herself, thinking about her warm bed back home, thinking about her children's faces. Her daughter Elena was 10 years old now. Her son Carlos was 7. Did they remember what she looked like? Did they understand why she left? When the sun came up on the 3rd day, Maria felt like she was dying. Her tongue was thick in her mouth. Her lips were cracked and bleeding. Every time she tried to swallow, it felt like swallowing sand. The young man left first. He said he was going to find help. He walked east, toward where he thought the road might be. Rosa left next, heading in a different direction. She was following some old tire tracks, hoping they would lead somewhere. The teenage boy stayed with Maria for a few more hours, but then he got scared and ran off too. And just like that, Maria was alone. Completely alone in the middle of the desert. She had no water, no food, no phone, no idea which direction to walk. The sun was climbing higher in the sky and she could already feel her skin starting to burn. She tried to walk, but her legs gave out after just a few steps. She crawled under a mesquite tree, the only shade she could find. The shade wasn't much, but it was better than nothing. She lay there on the hot sand, feeling her body shutting down. Maria reached into her pocket and pulled out a small photograph. It was wrinkled and faded, but she could still see their faces clearly. Elena and Carlos smiling at the camera. This photo was taken on Carlos's 6th birthday. They had a small cake, just a small one because that's all they could afford. But the kids were so happy, so full of life and hope. She pressed the photo to her chest and closed her eyes. Maybe this was it. Maybe this was how her story ended. Alone in the desert under a thorny tree miles from anywhere. She thought about her children growing up without her. She thought about her husband buried in the cemetery back home. Soon she would see him again. Birds were circling overhead. Big black birds, vultures. Maria knew what that meant. They were waiting. Just waiting for her to stop moving. Stop breathing. She tried to pray, but her mind was too foggy. The words wouldn't come. All she could think was, please, please let someone find my body. Please don't let my children wonder what happened to me. Please let them know I tried. I tried so hard to get to them. The heat was unbearable now. The kind of heat that makes the air shimmer and dance. The kind of heat that makes you see things that aren't there. Maria thought she saw water in the distance. She thought she saw people walking toward her. But when she blinked, there was nothing. Just empty desert stretching in every direction. She didn't know how much time passed. Minutes? Hours? Days? Time didn't mean anything anymore. There was only heat and thirst and the slow realization that she was dying. The smugglers had left her to die. Her group had scattered and left her to die. And now she was dying, alone with only a photo of her children and the circling vultures to keep her company. Maria woke up to the sound of absolute silence. That's the thing about the desert. The silence is so complete, so total that it's almost like a sound itself. It presses against your ears. It makes your heartbeat seem loud as thunder. She opened her eyes, but everything was blurry. Her eyelids felt like sandpaper. When she tried to move her tongue, it stuck to the roof of her mouth. She had read somewhere that a person could survive 3 days without water. How long had it been? She couldn't remember anymore. The morning sun was just starting to rise, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink. In any other situation, Maria would have thought it was beautiful. But now that rising sun felt like a death sentence. Another day of unbearable heat was coming. She tried to sit up and immediately felt dizzy. The world spun around her. She grabbed onto the trunk of the mesquite tree to steady herself. That's when she noticed something. The 2 people who had been with her yesterday were gone. Rosa and the teenage boy, both gone. For a moment, Maria felt a surge of hope. Maybe they went to get help. Maybe they found a road or a house. Maybe they would come back with water and rescue workers. But deep down she knew better. They had left to save themselves. Everyone in the desert eventually reaches a point where it's every person for themselves. She was truly alone now. The reality of it hit her like a punch to the stomach. No one knew where she was. The guide who brought them here was long gone. The other members of her group had scattered in all directions. Even if someone wanted to find her, how would they know where to look? Maria thought about her phone. She had bought a cheap one before leaving Honduras. But the smugglers made her throw it away before they crossed the border. They said the border patrol could track phones. So she had tossed it in a trash can at the last town. Now she wished she had kept it. At least then she could have tried to call someone. Anyone. The temperature was rising fast. Maria could feel it even in the shade. By mid-morning, the heat was so intense she could barely breathe. Each breath felt like inhaling fire. Her chest hurt. Her head was pounding like someone was hitting it with a hammer from the inside. She looked down at her arms and saw that her skin was bright red, covered in painful blisters. Sunburn. Severe sunburn. She had been wearing a long-sleeve shirt, but it was thin cotton meant for the cool evenings. It did nothing to protect her from the desert sun. Her thoughts started to wander. She began seeing things that weren't there. At one point, she was sure she saw her daughter Elena standing a few feet away, wearing her school uniform. Elena was calling to her, saying, "Mama, come home. Please come home." Maria tried to reach out, but her daughter vanished like smoke. Then she saw her husband. He looked exactly like he did the day he died. He was smiling at her, holding out his hand. "Come with me," he seemed to say. It's easier this way. No more pain. No more struggle. Maria almost got up to follow him. Almost. But then she remembered. Her children needed her. They were waiting for her. She couldn't give up yet. The sun climbed higher and higher in the sky until it was directly overhead. There was no shade anymore. The small shadow cast by the mesquite tree had shrunk to almost nothing. Maria tried to curl herself into the smallest possible space to stay in what little shade remained. She noticed the vultures again. There were more of them now. 5 or 6 of them circling lazily in the blue sky. They were patient birds. They could wait. They had all the time in the world. And they knew something Maria was trying not to accept. They knew she was dying, her body was shutting down one system at a time. First, she stopped sweating. That was a bad sign. It meant her body had no more water to spare. Then her muscles started cramping, sharp, painful cramps in her legs and stomach. Her kidneys were probably failing. She had learned about this in school, back when she was young and education seemed important. Now that knowledge was just making her death more frightening, because she understood exactly what was happening to her. She pulled out the photograph of her children again. The edges were torn now from being handled so much, but their faces were still clear. Elena with her serious expression and Carlos with his gap-toothed smile. She talked to them even though they couldn't hear her. "I'm sorry," she whispered, her voice barely a croak. "I'm so sorry I couldn't make it. I tried. You have to know I tried so hard. Everything I did was for you, everything. I hope your aunt takes good care of you. I hope you grow up strong and happy. I hope you forgive me for leaving." Tears ran down her cheeks, but they weren't normal tears. They were thick and sticky. Her body was so dehydrated that even her tears were different. She touched her face and her skin felt like paper. Dry, brittle paper that might tear at any moment. As the afternoon wore on, Maria drifted in and out of consciousness. Sometimes she was in the desert. Sometimes she was back in her kitchen in Honduras cooking beans and rice for her family. Sometimes she was at the market, selling vegetables and joking with the other vendors. Her mind was mixing up past and present, reality and dream. At some point she realized she couldn't feel her feet anymore, or her hands. Her body was going numb. Was this what dying felt like? This strange floating sensation? This feeling of slowly disconnecting from her own body? She thought about all the people who had crossed this desert before her. How many of them had died like this, alone under the burning sun slowly baking to death? She had heard stories back in Honduras about the dangers of the crossing. But hearing stories and living through it were completely different things. The worst part wasn't the physical pain. It was the regret. Maria regretted so many things. She regretted not spending more time with her children before sending them away. She regretted not telling her mother goodbye properly. She regretted trusting the smugglers. She regretted every single decision that had led her to this moment, dying alone in a foreign desert. But then she thought about what would have happened if she stayed in Honduras. The gang members would have come back. They might have hurt her children. They might have forced her son to join them or sold her daughter. No, she decided. Even dying here was better than that. At least her children were safe. At least they were in Los Angeles with family, going to school, having a chance at a real life. That thought gave her a small measure of peace. If this was the price she had to pay for her children's safety, then so be it. She would pay it. She clutched the photograph tighter against her chest. The sun was starting to go down now. Maria could tell because the light was changing from harsh white to soft orange. Another day was ending. Would she see another sunrise? Probably not. She could feel her body giving up. Her heart was beating strangely, skipping beats, fluttering like a trapped bird. She closed her eyes and let the darkness take her. If this was the end, at least she wouldn't suffer much longer. Tom Rodriguez had been ranching in southern Arizona his entire life. 58 years old, weathered skin, hands rough from decades of hard work. His grandfather bought this land back in the 1940s, and Tom had grown up riding these trails, knowing every rock and ravine like the back of his hand. This particular morning started like any other. Tom woke up at 5:30, made himself a strong pot of coffee, and checked the weather forecast. It was going to be another scorcher. Temperature would probably hit 115 degrees by afternoon. He needed to check the water tank on the eastern section of his property. His cattle would need it. He saddled up his horse, a calm bay mare named Copper, and called for his dog. Scout was a border collie, black and white, smart as any dog Tom had ever owned. Scout came running, tail wagging, excited for the morning ride. They headed out around 7 in the morning. The sun was already hot, but the air still had a slight coolness to it. Tom wore his usual work clothes. Jeans, a long-sleeved shirt to protect from the sun, a wide-brimmed hat, and sturdy boots. He carried 2 large water bottles, one for him, one for Scout. The ride to the water tank took about 45 minutes. Tom's property was huge, almost 10,000 acres of rocky desert land dotted with mesquite trees and cactus. Not much grew here, but it was home. His family's home for 3 generations. As he rode, Tom thought about the state of things. The border was only about 15 miles south of his property. Over the years, he had found plenty of evidence of people crossing. Empty water bottles, backpacks, sometimes clothes left behind when people needed to move faster. He'd even found a few people over the years, some alive, some not. It was part of life out here. The desert didn't care about politics or borders. It just took whatever it wanted. When they reached the water tank, Tom dismounted and checked the level. Good. Still half full. The pump was working fine. He made a note to come back in a week to check again. He was about to mount back up when Scout suddenly took off running. "Scout, get back here!" Tom called, but the dog kept going, barking frantically. That wasn't like Scout at all. He was a well-trained dog. He never ran off like that unless something was seriously wrong. Tom climbed back on Copper and rode after his dog. Scout was heading toward a cluster of mesquite trees about 200 yards away. The dog's barking got louder and more urgent. Tom felt his stomach tighten. He'd heard that kind of barking before. It usually meant trouble. When he reached the trees, Scout was standing near a mesquite looking down at something on the ground. Tom's heart sank when he saw what it was. A person. A woman lying face down in the dirt, completely still. Tom jumped off his horse and ran over. He knelt down beside the woman and gently turned her over. She was young, maybe in her 30s. Her lips were cracked and bleeding. Her skin was bright red, covered in severe sunburn and blisters. She wasn't moving. For a terrible moment, Tom thought she was dead. Then he saw her chest move. Just barely. A tiny, shallow breath. She was alive. "Barely alive, but alive, ma'am? Ma'am, can you hear me?" Tom said, no response. Her eyes were closed, sunken deep into her skull. She was severely dehydrated. Heat stroke for sure. Maybe kidney failure. He'd seen enough desert emergencies to know this woman was in critical condition. Tom immediately pulled out his cell phone and dialed 911. His hands were shaking as he held the phone to his ear. 911, what's your emergency? I've got a woman here, unconscious, severe dehydration and heat stroke. I'm on my ranch about 15 miles north of the border. I need a medical helicopter right away. The dispatcher stayed calm, asking for his exact location. Tom gave her his GPS coordinates. She told him the helicopter would be there in about 30 minutes. 30 minutes. That seemed like forever. What should I do until they get here? Tom asked. The dispatcher walked him through it. Move her to better shade. Give her small amounts of water, but not too much too fast. Keep her cool if possible. Monitor her breathing. Tom worked quickly. He tied Copper to a tree and used his body to create more shade for the woman. He pulled out his water bottle and carefully wet his bandana, then dabbed it on her lips. Just a few drops of water at first. Her body reacted instinctively, her throat trying to swallow even though she was unconscious. He gave her a little more water, letting it drip slowly into her mouth. Too much too fast could make things worse. He'd learned that from experience. He remembered finding a man once years ago who was dehydrated. Tom had given him too much water too quickly and the man had gotten sick, throwing it all back up. Scout sat nearby, whining softly. The dog seemed to understand that something serious was happening. Tom kept talking to the woman even though she couldn't hear him. "You're going to be okay. Help is coming! Just hang on. Hang on for me." He looked around and noticed things he'd missed at first. Her clothes were filthy, torn in several places. Her shoes were worn through, her feet bloody and covered in blisters. There was no backpack, no water bottle, nothing. She had been out here with absolutely nothing. He also noticed something clutched in her hand. A photograph. Tom carefully pried her fingers open and looked at it. 2 children, a girl and a boy, smiling at the camera. His throat tightened. This woman had kids. She was somebody's mother. Tom had 3 grown daughters of his own. The oldest was 35, just about this woman's age. He couldn't imagine his daughter being in this situation. Abandoned in the desert, dying alone. The thought made him angry. Angry at whoever had left this woman here. Angry at a system that pushed people to these desperate measures. The minutes crawled by. Tom kept monitoring her breathing, kept giving her tiny sips of water. The sun climbed higher. It was getting hotter by the minute. He used his shirt to create more shade, sitting there in just his undershirt. Finally, after what felt like hours but was really only 28 minutes, Tom heard the sound of helicopter blades in the distance. He stood up and waved his hat, making sure they could see him. The helicopter circled once, finding a clear spot to land about 50 yards away. 2 paramedics jumped out carrying equipment. They ran over, immediately taking over. One of them, a young woman with short dark hair, started checking vital signs while the other, an older man, set up an IV line. "How long has she been like this?" The female paramedic asked. "I don't know. I found her about 30 minutes ago." She's been unconscious the whole time. Did you give her any water? Yes, just small amounts. I didn't want to give her too much. You did exactly right, she said. Probably saved her life. They worked efficiently, getting the IV started, checking her temperature with a special thermometer. Tom heard them talking in medical terms he didn't understand, but he understood their tone. This woman was in bad shape, really bad shape. They loaded her onto a stretcher and carried her to the helicopter. One of the paramedics turned to Tom before getting in. You did good. If you'd found her an hour later, she'd probably be dead. You saved this woman's life, Tom just nodded. He didn't feel like a hero. He felt sad. Sad that the world was in a state where mothers had to risk dying in the desert just to have a better life for their kids. The helicopter lifted off, kicking up dust and sand. Tom watched it disappear into the sky, heading north toward Tucson. Scout came and sat beside him, leaning against his leg. Tom reached down and scratched the dog's ears. Good boy, Scout, good boy. He looked at the spot where the woman had been lying. The photograph had fallen on the ground. He picked it up carefully, folded it, and put it in his shirt pocket. He'd make sure she got it back. A mother should have a picture of her children, especially now. Tom mounted back up on Copper and headed home. But he knew this day would stay with him forever. Some things you just can't forget. The first thing Maria became aware of was beeping. A steady rhythmic beeping sound. Then came the sensation of something cold in her arm. Then voices, distant and muffled, like people talking underwater. She tried to open her eyes, but her eyelids felt glued shut. Where was she? What happened? Her last clear memory was lying under the mesquite tree, certain she was dying. Was she dead? Was this what death felt like? She forced her eyes open. Everything was white and blurry. Slowly, shapes came into focus. A white ceiling. White walls. Medical equipment. She was in a hospital. She was alive. A woman in scrubs appeared beside her bed. A nurse with kind eyes and gray hair pulled back in a ponytail. Oh good, you're awake. Take it easy, don't try to move too much. You're in the ICU at Tucson Medical Center. You've been very sick. Maria tried to speak, but nothing came out. Her throat felt like it was filled with sand. The nurse held a small cup of ice chips to her lips. Just a little at first. Your body needs to adjust. Over the next few hours, doctors came and went. They explained in careful English that she had been found in the desert 3 days ago. She had severe heat stroke, kidney failure, and dangerous levels of dehydration. Her body temperature when they brought her in was 107 degrees. Most people don't survive that. You're very lucky, one doctor said. Another hour and you wouldn't have made it. Lucky. Maria didn't feel lucky. She felt broken. Everything hurt. Her skin, her head, her chest, her kidneys. Even breathing hurt. The doctors explained she would be in the ICU for at least a few more days, while they monitored her kidney function and made sure the swelling in her brain went down. But Maria wasn't alone. On the second day she was conscious, a visitor came, a man in his late 50s wearing a clean button-up shirt and jeans. He had kind eyes and a weathered face. He stood awkwardly in the doorway until the nurse waved him in. This is Tom Rodriguez, the nurse said. He's the man who found you. Maria stared at him. This stranger had saved her life. She tried to say thank you, but the words came out as a weak whisper in Spanish. Tom smiled. No need to thank me. Anyone would have done the same. He held out a small bouquet of flowers. Simple wildflowers, probably picked from his own property. I thought these might brighten up your room. A hospital social worker named Linda came by later that day. She was in her 40s with warm brown eyes and an efficient manner. She spoke both English and Spanish, which was a relief. Linda explained that she was there to help. I know you're scared. I know you're worried about what happens next. But right now, you need to focus on getting better. We can talk about everything else later. But Maria couldn't stop worrying. What about her status? What about immigration? Would they deport her? And most importantly, what about her children? Did they know what happened? Were they worried sick? Linda seemed to read her mind. Your children are fine. I contacted your cousin in Los Angeles. I told her you're safe and recovering. She's going to explain to the kids that you had an accident, but you're okay now. Tears rolled down Maria's cheeks. Her babies. At least they knew she was alive. Over the next few days, Linda worked quietly in the background. She contacted immigration lawyers. She pulled together Maria's story, the documentation she had about why she fled Honduras, the death certificate of Maria's husband. Police reports about the gang violence in her neighborhood. Witness statements from neighbors. Linda also discovered that Maria had a legitimate claim for asylum. Her husband had been murdered for refusing to pay extortion to a criminal organization. Maria and her children had been threatened. According to international law, she had the right to seek protection. Tom came to visit every single day. He never stayed long, maybe 15 or 20 minutes. Sometimes he just sat quietly reading a newspaper. Sometimes he told her stories about his ranch, about his 3 daughters, about his wife who made the best apple pie in Arizona. Maria didn't understand why this man kept coming back. She tried to ask him once through Linda, who translated, "Why are you being so kind to me? You don't know me." Tom thought about it for a moment. "My grandfather came to this country with nothing. He worked in the copper mines, saved every penny, and eventually bought that ranch. He taught me that we're all just people trying to make a better life. Doesn't matter where you're from or how you got here. What matters is how we treat each other." On the 5th day, Maria was moved out of the ICU into a regular room. This was progress. Her kidneys were starting to work again. The swelling in her brain had gone down. She was eating real food, though not much. Small amounts of soup, crackers, juice. Tom visited that afternoon, and this time he brought his wife, Beverly. She was a small woman with silver hair and a warm smile. She had brought homemade cookies and a Spanish-English dictionary. "I wish I could speak Spanish better," Beverly said through Linda's translation. "But I wanted you to know that we've been praying for you. Our whole church has been praying for you." Maria was overwhelmed. These people, these complete strangers, had welcomed her with such kindness. It was more than she had expected, more than she felt she deserved. Linda pulled Maria aside later that evening. "I've been working with an immigration attorney. We're going to file an asylum application for you. It's not going to be quick or easy, but you have a strong case. In the meantime, because of your medical condition and your pending asylum claim, you won't be detained." "What does that mean?" Maria asked. "It means once you're released from the hospital, you'll be free to go to your family in Los Angeles while your case is processed. You'll have to check in regularly with immigration officials, but you won't be locked up." Maria couldn't believe what she was hearing. She would get to see her children. After everything she'd been through, after nearly dying, she was actually going to make it to Los Angeles. But there was still the matter of the hospital bills. Maria knew that medical care in America was expensive. She had no insurance, no money, nothing. How would she ever pay for this? Linda smiled. "Don't worry about that right now. There are programs that can help. And honestly, you just focus on getting better. The money will figure itself out." What Maria didn't know was that Tom had already been working behind the scenes. He had talked to the hospital administrators. He had talked to his church. He had even talked to some of his neighbors. People were coming together to help. 1 week after she was admitted, Maria was finally strong enough to sit up in a chair by the window. She looked out at the city of Tucson spread below. Somewhere out there, beyond those buildings and streets, was the desert where she nearly died. And somewhere beyond that desert were her children waiting for her. Tom visited that afternoon and brought something with him. He pulled a folded piece of paper from his pocket. The photograph of Elena and Carlos. "I found this in your hand when I found you. I thought you might want it back." Maria took the photograph with shaking hands. She pressed it to her heart and started crying. Not sad tears this time, grateful tears. Through Linda's translation, she told Tom everything. About her husband's murder, about sending her children away, about the impossible choice between staying in danger or risking the desert crossing, about the smugglers who abandoned them, about lying under that tree, certain she would die. Tom listened to everything. He didn't interrupt, didn't judge, didn't offer empty platitudes. He just listened. And when she was done, he simply said, "I'm glad I found you. I'm glad you survived, and I'm glad you're going to see your kids again." That night, alone in her hospital room, Maria thought about everything that had happened. She had come so close to death, closer than she ever wanted to be again. But somehow, miraculously, she had survived. A rancher and his dog had found her. Doctors had saved her. A social worker had fought for her. And now she had a real chance at the life she'd been seeking. It wasn't the journey she'd imagined. It was harder, scarier, more painful than anything she'd planned for. But she was here. She was alive. And soon, very soon, she would hold her children again. Tom Rodriguez never expected to become the center of attention. He was a quiet man who minded his own business, worked his land, and went to church on Sundays. But life has a way of pushing people into the spotlight whether they want it or not. It started with a local news reporter who heard about the rescue from someone at the hospital. She showed up at Tom's ranch 3 days after he found Maria, camera crew in tow. Tom tried to turn her away, but she was persistent. "Mr. Rodriguez, you saved a woman's life. That's a big story. People need to hear about it." Tom reluctantly agreed to a short interview. He stood in front of his barn, hat in hand, feeling awkward. The reporter asked him to describe what happened. He told the story simply, without exaggeration. He found a woman dying in the desert. He called for help. That was it. "Do you know she's undocumented?" the reporter asked. "Does that change how you feel about saving her?" Tom looked directly at the camera. "Ma'am, when you find someone dying, you don't ask to see their papers. You help them. That's what decent people do." The interview aired that evening on the local news. By the next morning, it had been picked up by news outlets across Arizona. By afternoon, it was on national news. Tom's simple statement about helping people had struck a nerve. His phone started ringing constantly. Some calls were supportive, people thanking him for being a good human being. But other calls were angry. Very angry. "You're helping illegals," one man shouted over the phone. "You're part of the problem. They're invading our country and you're giving them aid and comfort." Another caller yelled. Tom was shocked by the intensity of the hatred. He'd lived in this area his whole life. He knew the border situation was complicated. He'd dealt with trespassing on his property. He'd seen the damage that drug smugglers sometimes caused. He understood the frustration. But he couldn't reconcile letting a human being die with any set of beliefs or politics. His faith, his upbringing, his basic sense of right and wrong wouldn't allow it. His wife Beverly stood firmly beside him. When some of their friends from church expressed disappointment in Tom's actions, she set them straight. "Are you serious right now?" Beverly said to a couple they'd known for 20 years. "Our pastor preaches about the Good Samaritan every other month. How is this any different?" "It's different because she broke the law coming here," the wife replied. "So did the people the Samaritan helped," Beverly shot back. "The law said Jews and Samaritans shouldn't associate. But he helped anyway. That's the whole point of the story. Some friendships survived these conversations, others didn't. Tom found out quickly who his real friends were, but Tom also found unexpected allies. People he'd never met started showing up at his door. A young teacher from Tucson drove out to shake his hand. An elderly couple brought him a homemade cake. A group of college students asked if they could volunteer on his ranch to show their support. The local newspaper ran an editorial supporting Tom's actions. The editor wrote, "In a time when our politics have become increasingly polarized, it's refreshing to see someone act on basic human decency rather than political ideology." But not everyone saw it that way. One afternoon, Tom was in town buying supplies when he ran into his neighbor, Jack Peterson. Jack owned the ranch to the east of Tom's property. They'd been neighbors for 30 years. "Tom," Jack said coldly, "we need to talk." They stepped outside the feed store. Jack's face was red with anger. "Do you know what you've done? You've basically invited more people to cross through our land. You've told them that if they get in trouble, Americans will bail them out." "I didn't invite anyone to do anything," Tom said quietly. "I found a dying woman and got her help. It's the principle, Tom. We've all dealt with problems from the border. Fences cut, water tanks destroyed, trash everywhere. And now you're being held up as some kind of hero for helping the very people causing these problems? That woman wasn't cutting fences or destroying property. She was dying. Today it's one woman. Tomorrow it's 10 people. Where does it end?" Tom didn't have an answer for that. He understood Jack's frustration. He really did. But he couldn't apologize for saving someone's life. The conversation ended badly, with Jack walking away without another word. That hurt. Jack and Tom had been good neighbors for decades. They'd helped each other through droughts, through cattle diseases, through personal tragedies. And now that friendship was damaged, maybe beyond repair. But something else was happening too. The story had reached beyond the local community. Tom started receiving letters from across the country. Most were supportive. One letter came from a woman in Ohio, whose own mother had immigrated from Poland years ago. She thanked Tom for remembering that immigrants are human beings. Another letter came from a veteran who served in Afghanistan. He wrote about finding a wounded child in a village and how he'd called for a medical evacuation, even though protocol said he shouldn't. "You did the right thing," the veteran wrote. Sometimes the right thing doesn't fit neatly into policy or politics. The church community was divided. Some members, like Beverly said, thought Tom had lived out their Christian values. Others worried about the message it sent. Father Miguel, the pastor, tried to find middle ground. He gave a sermon about compassion and law, about mercy and justice, about how people of faith should struggle with these difficult questions rather than retreating to easy answers. Meanwhile, Tom kept visiting Maria at the hospital. He brought her books in Spanish that Beverly found at the library. He brought her news of her children, which Linda, the social worker, helped coordinate. He treated her like he would want someone to treat his own daughters if they were in trouble. One day, a reporter from a major news network showed up, wanting to do a bigger story. She wanted to interview both Tom and Maria to film them together. Tom asked Maria what she thought. "I don't want to cause you more trouble," Maria said through Linda's translation. "You've already done so much for me." "You're not causing me trouble," Tom said. "Some people just don't want to see things the way they really are. But I'm not hiding what I did. I'm not ashamed of it." So they did the interview. Maria told her story. The murder of her husband, the threats to her children, the desperate decision to send them ahead while she stayed behind to gather money, the crossing, the abandonment, the certainty that she would die. Tom told his side. Finding her, making the call, waiting for the helicopter, the photograph of her children that he found clutched in her hand. The reporter asked Tom the question everyone wanted to know. "You describe yourself as a conservative. You've voted Republican your whole life. You support border security. How do you reconcile that with helping someone who entered the country illegally?" Tom thought carefully before answering. "I don't think those things are as contradictory as people make them out to be. I do think we need secure borders. I do think we need to know who's coming into our country. But I also think we need to remember that behind every political debate are actual human beings. This woman isn't a political statement. She's a mother who was trying to save her children. How can I claim to be a person of faith if I'd let her die to make a political point?" The interview aired on national television. Response was intense and immediate. Tom's phone rang off the hook. His email inbox exploded. The ranch's address somehow got posted online, and he started receiving mail by the bagful. Most of it was supportive, but some of it was vicious. Anonymous letters calling him a traitor, threats against his property. One letter said they hoped his ranch burned down. Beverly threw those away before Tom could see most of them, but he knew they were coming. The local sheriff, an old friend, stopped by one evening. "Tom, I'm worried about your safety. Some of these threats might be serious." "I'm not letting anonymous cowards change how I live," Tom said. "I'm not asking you to. I'm asking you to be careful. Maybe install some better security cameras. Keep your doors locked," Tom agreed, though he hated having to think this way. This was his home. He'd never locked his doors in 58 years. Now he had to worry about strangers with bad intentions. But through all of this, something beautiful was also happening. People were organizing. Linda, the social worker, connected with local attorneys who specialized in immigration cases. They agreed to take Maria's asylum case pro bono. A fundraising page was set up to help with her medical bills, and donations poured in from around the country. A group of activists in Tucson started a water drop program, placing large water containers in the desert to help prevent deaths. They credited Tom's story with inspiring their action. The mayor of Tucson invited Tom to a town hall meeting to discuss border issues and humanitarian concerns. Tom almost declined, feeling out of his depth. But Beverly encouraged him. "You have a voice now," she said. "People are listening. Use it to say something worth hearing." At the town hall, Tom spoke from the heart. He talked about the complexity of the situation, about legitimate security concerns, about the humanity that sometimes got lost in political debates, about finding Maria and knowing instantly that politics didn't matter in that moment. "I don't have all the answers," he told the audience. "I'm just a rancher. But I know right from wrong, and leaving someone to die is wrong. I don't care what side of the aisle you're on. I hope we can all agree on that much." The town of Esperanza Springs had a population of just under 8,000 people. Everyone knew everyone. Your business was everyone's business. And right now, Tom Rodriguez's business was the hottest topic in town. The local diner, Betty's Place, had always been neutral ground. where ranchers and teachers, mechanics and nurses, old-timers and young families all gathered for coffee and pie. But these days the atmosphere was tense. People who used to sit together now chose separate tables. One morning Tom walked in for his usual breakfast. The place went quiet. Some people nodded at him in greeting. Others looked away. A few got up and left. Tom felt the weight of those stares but kept his head high. He sat at the counter and ordered scrambled eggs and coffee. Betty herself, who'd owned the diner for 30 years, came over to pour his coffee. She was a no-nonsense woman in her 60s who didn't tolerate drama in her establishment. "Don't you pay them any mind," she said quietly. "Half the people mad at you would have done the exact same thing if they'd been in your shoes. They're just scared to admit it." But the division wasn't just about Tom. It had opened up something deeper in the community. Years of tension about border issues, about changing demographics, about economic struggles, all came bubbling to the surface. At the next town council meeting, the room was packed. People showed up who'd never attended a council meeting in their lives. The official agenda was about zoning regulations, but everyone knew what people really wanted to talk about. During the public comment section, resident after resident stood up to speak. A rancher named Hank Williams spoke first. He was a big man with a permanent scowl. "I've had my property destroyed by people crossing through," Hank said. "Cut fences, trampled crops. My wife found a group of 20 people camped right by our house last year. She was terrified. Now we're supposed to celebrate helping more people come through." Several people applauded. But then a woman named Jennifer Torres stood up. She was a school teacher, third-generation Mexican-American, and she was angry. "My grandparents came here legally, but they were treated like criminals anyway," Jennifer said. "They were citizens and people still told them to go back to Mexico. So let's not pretend this is really about legal versus illegal. Some of you just don't want brown people here at all." That caused an uproar, people shouting over each other. The mayor banging her gavel, calling for order. Dr. Raymond Chen, who ran the community health clinic, stood up next. He was a quiet man who rarely spoke at these meetings. "I treated 6 cases of severe dehydration last year," Dr. Chen said. "People found in the desert near death. 3 of them had lasting kidney damage. 1 lost his sight from heat stroke. This is a humanitarian crisis happening on our doorstep. Whatever your politics, we can't ignore that people are dying. They chose to come here illegally." Someone shouted from the back. "Nobody chooses to die in the desert," Dr. Chen replied. "They're desperate, running from violence, from poverty, from situations most of us can't imagine. That doesn't make it legal, but it should make us compassionate." The meeting went on for 3 hours. No solutions were reached. No minds were changed. Everyone left frustrated. Tom's own extended family was divided. His youngest daughter, Rachel, called him crying. "Dad, Uncle Frank isn't speaking to me because of what you did. He said our family is helping destroy America." I tried to explain, but he won't listen. Frank was Tom's brother. They'd worked side by side on the family ranch for 40 years before Frank retired and moved to town. Tom tried calling him, but Frank wouldn't pick up. Finally, Tom drove to Frank's house and knocked on the door. Frank answered, but didn't invite him in. They stood on the porch. 2 brothers who looked so much alike they could have been twins, now on opposite sides of an argument neither wanted. "You should have just called Border Patrol and left her there," Frank said. "Let them handle it." "She would have been dead before they arrived," Tom replied. "You know that." "What would you have done, Frank, really? If you'd found her dying under that tree, what would you have done?" Frank looked away. "That's not fair. You're making this about one person when it's about a much bigger problem." "It is about one person. That's exactly what it's about. When you're standing there looking at someone who's dying, it's not political. It's personal. It's immediate. It's life or death. And now you've become the poster boy for open borders. Is that what you wanted?" "I'm not anyone's poster boy. I saved a woman's life. That's it." They stood in silence for a long moment. Finally, Frank said, "I need time to think about this." Then he went back inside and closed the door. Tom walked back to his truck with a heavy heart. He'd never been at odds with his brother. They'd weathered every storm together. And now this. At the local Catholic church, Father Miguel was struggling to keep his congregation together. Some members wanted him to condemn Tom's actions. Others wanted him to celebrate them. He tried to preach about compassion and understanding, but even that felt like taking sides. One Sunday, a group of about 30 people stood up in the middle of Mass and walked out. Their spokesperson, a woman named Patricia Ruiz, explained their action to reporters outside. "The church is supposed to stand for what's right," Patricia said, "but Father Miguel is being wishy-washy. The Bible is clear about welcoming strangers and helping those in need. If the church won't take a stand on that, what good is it?" The next Sunday, a different group of about 20 people walked out, angry that the church wasn't being tougher on immigration. Father Miguel watched his church split down the middle and felt helpless. He went to visit Tom one afternoon, needing advice from someone who understood. "How are you handling all this?" Father Miguel asked. "The anger, the division?" Tom was mending a fence. He paused and wiped sweat from his forehead. "Honestly, Father, some days I wonder if I should have just kept my mouth shut. Not about saving her. I'd do that again in a heartbeat. But maybe I shouldn't have talked to reporters. Maybe I should have just let it be a quiet thing. But it wouldn't have been quiet. Someone would have found out and made it public anyway. I suppose you're right." Tom hammered another nail. "I just wish people could see this isn't about politics. It's about human decency. That's what I keep trying to tell my congregation, but people hear what they want to hear." Meanwhile, at the local high school, students were divided too. A group of students organized a walkout in support of immigrant rights inspired by Maria's story. Another group organized a counter-protest about border security. Teachers were caught in the middle, trying to maintain order while respecting students' rights to express their views. The principal, Mrs. Harriet Duncan, called an assembly to address the tension. She spoke about respectful dialogue, about understanding different perspectives, about the importance of empathy even when you disagree. "This community is struggling right now," she told the students. "Adults are fighting, families are divided, but you're the future. You're the ones who will have to figure out how to live together despite differences. Learn from the mistakes you're seeing in adults. Learn to listen more than you speak. Learn to find common ground." It was a nice speech, but realistically the kids were just reflecting what they saw at home. If adults couldn't figure out how to have civil conversations, how could they expect teenagers to do better? The local newspaper ran an editorial calling for calm and reasoned debate. Instead, the comments section became a war zone of angry accusations and personal attacks. Business owners in town started to feel the impact. Betty's Diner saw a drop in customers as people avoided running into neighbors they were angry with. The hardware store owner complained that some customers refused to shop there because they knew he supported Tom's actions. The feed store lost customers who disagreed with the owner's opposition to Tom. The economic pressure made people even angrier. Now it wasn't just about principles. It was about money. Tom tried to stay focused on his ranch work, but the controversy followed him everywhere. When he went to the feed store, strangers recognized him and wanted to debate immigration policy. When he went to the bank, the teller made a pointed comment about people who enable lawbreaking. Beverly was dealing with her own challenges. She'd been part of a weekly quilting circle for 15 years. After Tom's rescue of Maria, 2 of the women told her she wasn't welcome anymore. "They said I chose my husband over my community," Beverly told Tom that night, tears in her eyes. "As if that's even a choice. Of course I stand by you. You did the right thing." Tom held his wife close. "I'm sorry this has affected you. If I could go back, I'd still save her. But I wish I could protect you from the fallout." "Don't you dare apologize," Beverly said fiercely. "I'm proud of you. I'm proud to be married to a man who values life over politics. Yet despite all the division, something else was happening too. Small acts of kindness were breaking through the anger. Anonymous donors were paying for Maria's hospital bills. Volunteers were organizing to leave water in the desert. Churches across denominations were working together on humanitarian projects. A group of ranchers, some who disagreed with Tom and some who supported him, came together to discuss practical solutions. How could they maintain security on their property while also ensuring people didn't die? It was a start. A small start, but a start. 6 weeks after Tom found her in the desert, Maria stood at the entrance of Tucson Medical Center ready to leave. She was thin, still recovering but alive. The doctors had cleared her for discharge with instructions to follow up with a clinic in Los Angeles. Linda, the social worker who'd become her advocate and friend, stood beside her with final paperwork. "Your cousin is expecting you. I called her yesterday. The kids are so excited they can barely sleep." Maria's hands trembled as she held a small bag containing her few belongings. Tom and Beverly had bought her some clothes since she'd arrived with nothing. A simple outfit, comfortable shoes, and a warm jacket. She wore them now, feeling strange in clothes that didn't carry the dirt and memories of the desert. Tom pulled up in his truck. Beverly was in the passenger seat. They'd offered to drive Maria the 6 hours to Los Angeles. It was a long drive, but they insisted. "We want to see this through," Tom had said. "We want to make sure you get to your kids safely." The drive was quiet at first. Maria sat in the back seat, watching the desert landscape pass by. This was the same desert that had nearly killed her. But seen from the safety of a truck, with water bottles and snacks, with air conditioning and comfortable seats, it looked different, less menacing, just sand and rocks and sky. They stopped for lunch at a small diner in Phoenix. Maria was still self-conscious about her appearance. The sunburn had healed but left her skin discolored in patches. Her hair was starting to grow back in spots where it had been damaged. She felt people staring and wanted to disappear, but Beverly took her hand. "Hold your head up, you survived. That's something to be proud of, not ashamed of." Back in the truck, Maria finally opened up. Through a translation app on Beverly's phone, she told them more details about her life in Honduras, about her husband who sold hardware in the market, about Elena who loved to read and wanted to be a teacher, about Carlos who was obsessed with soccer and could name every player on every professional team. "I missed Carlos's 7th birthday," Maria said, her voice breaking. "I sent him a card, but it's not the same. A boy needs his mother on his birthday." "You'll have many more birthdays with him," Beverly assured her. "This sacrifice you made, he'll understand when he's older. He'll know you did it out of love." As they got closer to Los Angeles, Maria's anxiety grew. 6 hours became 5, then 4, then 3. What if her children didn't recognize her? What if they were angry with her for being gone so long? What if the trauma had changed them? Tom noticed her nervousness in the rearview mirror. "They're going to be so happy to see you. Trust me, I have 3 daughters. I know how kids think. They've been worried sick about you. Having you back is all they want." They arrived at Maria's cousin's apartment complex just as the sun was setting. It was a modest building in a working-class neighborhood. Children played in the courtyard. The smell of cooking filled the air. It reminded Maria of home, but a safer version of home. Her cousin, Luisa, lived on the 2nd floor. Tom carried Maria's small bag as they climbed the stairs. Maria's heart was pounding so hard she thought it might burst. Her hands were shaking. Beverly squeezed her arm encouragingly. Luisa opened the door before they could knock. She must have been watching from the window. She was a few years younger than Maria, with kind eyes and a warm smile. "Prima," Luisa cried, pulling Maria into a tight hug. They both started crying immediately. These were cousins who'd grown up together, played together, shared secrets together, and now they were reunited in a foreign country, under circumstances neither had imagined. Then Maria heard the voices she'd been dreaming about for months. "Mama! Mama!" Elena appeared in the doorway first. She was 10 years old, tall for her age with long dark hair and a ponytail. For a split second, she just stared, as if she couldn't believe her eyes. Then she ran forward and threw herself into Maria's arms. "Mama, you're here. You're really here." Maria held her daughter so tight she thought she might break her. She buried her face in Elena's hair and sobbed. "Mi amor, mi corazón. I missed you so much, so much." Then Carlos appeared. He was smaller, shyer, hanging back a little. He'd only been 6 years old when Maria sent them away with Luisa. Had she become a stranger to him? "Carlos," Maria said gently, holding out her arm. "Come here, my baby." Carlos hesitated for just a moment. Then his face crumpled and he ran to her. "Mama, I thought you weren't coming. I thought you forgot about us." "Never," Maria said, pulling him close, holding both her children, feeling their solid reality against her. "I could never forget you. You are my whole world. My whole world." They stood there in the doorway, crying and holding each other, while Luisa, Tom, and Beverly wiped their own eyes. There was something so powerful about witnessing this reunion, something that transcended politics and borders and laws. It was simply a mother reunited with her children. Finally, they moved inside. The apartment was small but clean. 2 bedrooms, a tiny kitchen, a living room with a couch and TV. Louisa explained that she worked 2 jobs as a home health aide and house cleaner. She'd been taking care of Elena and Carlos for 8 months, treating them like her own children. "They've been so good," Louisa said. "Elena helps with cooking and cleaning. Carlos does his homework without being asked. They've been brave, waiting for you." Tom and Beverly stayed just long enough for Louisa to serve them coffee and pan dulce. They could see Maria needed time alone with her children. As they prepared to leave, Maria walked them to the door. Through the translation app, she tried to express what she was feeling. "You saved my life. You brought me here. I will never forget what you did for me, never. I don't know how to thank you enough." Tom shook his head. "You don't need to thank us. Just live a good life. Love your kids. That's enough." Beverly hugged Maria. "We're going to stay in touch, okay? You're not getting rid of us that easily. We want updates, photos of the kids, everything." After they left, Maria finally got to just be with Elena and Carlos. They sat on Luisa's couch, Maria in the middle with a child tucked under each arm. They talked for hours. The kids told her about their new school, about learning English, about making friends. "Some kids are mean," Carlos said. "They make fun of how I talk. But my teacher is nice. She speaks Spanish too." Elena showed Maria her report card. All good grades. "I'm trying to keep up," Elena said. "I want to make you proud." "I'm already proud," Maria said. "You've been so strong. Both of you. Taking care of each other, listening to Tia Luisa, keeping going even when it was hard. You are the bravest children I know." That night, Luisa made a special dinner. Chicken with rice and beans, homemade tortillas. It wasn't fancy, but it was delicious. As they ate, Maria felt something she hadn't felt in a very long time. Peace. She was with her children. They were safe. They were together. After dinner, Carlos asked the question Maria had been dreading. "Mama, what happened to you? Tia Luisa said you had an accident, but you were gone so long." Maria looked at Luisa, who nodded encouragingly. She decided to tell them the truth, but in a way they could understand. "The journey here was very difficult," Maria said carefully. "More difficult than I expected. I got lost in the desert and became very sick. But a good man found me and saved my life. Then doctors helped me get better. That's why it took so long." "Were you scared?" Elena asked. "Yes, very scared. But I kept thinking about you two. That's what kept me going." Carlos hugged her tighter. "I'm glad you didn't die." "Me too, baby. Me too." Later that evening, after the kids had gone to bed, Maria and Luisa sat at the kitchen table talking. Maria shared more details, the part she'd shielded from the children, the smugglers abandoning them, the certainty that she was dying, waking up in the hospital, Tom's kindness. "You're a miracle," Luisa said. "So many people don't survive the desert, but you did. God wasn't ready for you yet. He has plans for you still." Maria hoped that was true. She'd been given a second chance at life. She didn't want to waste it. Over the next few days, Maria adjusted to her new reality. Luisa's apartment was crowded with 4 people in a space meant for 1 or 2. But they made it work. Elena and Carlos gave up their room for Maria, insisting on sleeping on the couch so she could have privacy to recover. Maria started looking for work, though the lawyers handling her asylum case advised her to wait until she had proper documentation. In the meantime, Luisa taught her more English. The kids helped too, giggling when Maria mispronounced words but patiently correcting her. 1 week after arriving, Maria received a video call from Tom and Beverly. The kids crowded around the phone, excited to see the people who'd helped their mother. Tom was on the ranch with Scout the border collie by his side. Beverly waved from the kitchen. They asked how everyone was doing. The kids chattered excitedly about school and their neighborhood and their new friends. "Your mama is a very strong woman," Tom told them. You should be proud of her. We are, Elena said seriously. She's the best mama in the world. After the call ended, Carlos asked Maria, Are Tom and Beverly our family now? Maria thought about it. Family wasn't always blood. Sometimes it was the people who showed up when you needed them most. Yes, she said. I think they are. That night, Maria tucked her children into bed, something she'd dreamed about doing for 8 long months. She kissed Elena's forehead and Carlos's cheek. 1 year later, Maria stood in a courtroom in Los Angeles, her hands clasped tightly in front of her. Her lawyer, a woman named Rita Campos, who'd taken her case pro bono, stood beside her. Elena and Carlos sat in the gallery behind her, dressed in their best clothes. Luisa was there too, along with Linda, who'd flown in from Arizona just for this day. The immigration judge, a stern-looking woman in her 60s, reviewed the documents one final time. Then she looked up at Maria and spoke. Ms. Sanchez, based on the evidence presented, including documentation of the violence you and your family suffered in Honduras, witness testimonies, and country condition reports showing ongoing persecution of individuals who resist gang extortion, I am granting your application for asylum. You and your children are now officially recognized as refugees in the United States. Maria's knees buckled. Rita caught her arm, steadying her. The words took a moment to sink in. Asylum granted, she was safe. Her children were safe. Legally, officially, permanently safe. She turned to look at her kids. Elena was crying. Carlos had his hand over his mouth in shock. Then they were rushing forward and the bailiff was saying something about order in the court, but the judge just smiled and allowed the family their moment. We're staying, Mama? Carlos asked. Really staying? Nobody can make us leave? Nobody can make us leave, Maria confirmed, tears streaming down her face. After the hearing, they all went out to celebrate at a small restaurant that served Honduran food. Maria had been working 2 jobs for the past 8 months, saving every penny. Tonight she could afford to treat everyone to a real meal. As they ate, Maria thought about how much had changed in 1 year. She'd started working as soon as the doctors cleared her. First job was cleaning houses like Luisa. The work was hard and the pay wasn't great, but it was honest work. Then she'd gotten a second job at night, stocking shelves at a grocery store. Elena was thriving in school, getting straight A's and winning a writing competition. Carlos had joined a youth soccer league and talked about nothing else. They were building a life here. Maria's phone rang. It was Tom, calling to find out how the hearing went. She'd texted him when they'd arrived at court and he'd been waiting to hear. We got it, Maria said, her English much better now after months of practice. Asylum approved. She could hear Tom's whoop of joy even before he spoke. That's wonderful, Beverly. Beverly, they got asylum. Then back to Maria. We're so happy for you. You deserve this. You and those kids deserve every good thing. I call you later? Maria said. We are celebrating now. Of course. Enjoy yourselves. We'll talk soon. Back in Arizona, Tom hung up the phone and felt a weight lift from his shoulders. He'd been worried about Maria's case, though he'd tried not to show it. Now she was safe. Really, truly safe. The past year had been transformative for Tom, too. After the initial controversy died down, he'd found himself in an unusual position. People wanted to hear from him. Churches invited him to speak. Community organizations asked him to participate in panels about immigration and border issues. At first, Tom had resisted. He was a rancher, not a public speaker. But Beverly encouraged him. You have something valuable to say. You've lived through this. You understand the complexity in a way most people don't. So Tom started accepting some invitations. He spoke at churches across Arizona and New Mexico. He didn't preach or lecture. He just told his story, finding Maria, saving her, watching his community split over what should have been a simple act of human decency. I don't have all the answers about immigration policy, Tom would tell audiences. I'm not a politician or an expert. But I know what I believe. I believe in secure borders and I believe in human compassion. I don't think those things have to be opposites. We can want to control who comes into our country, while also refusing to let people die in the desert. It's not that complicated. His message resonated with people who were tired of the all-or-nothing rhetoric that dominated political discussions. People who wanted to believe that nuance and compassion could coexist with the rule of law. Tom's relationship with his community had slowly healed. Not completely. Some people still thought he'd been wrong, but most had come to respect his position, even if they didn't fully agree with it. His brother Frank had eventually called, awkward and uncomfortable but willing to talk. They weren't back to where they'd been, but they were brothers again. That was something. The church had found its footing too. Father Miguel had organized a humanitarian group that worked to place water stations in the desert. It wasn't political, he insisted. It was purely humanitarian, preventing death. Some members still disagreed, but most supported the effort. Tom himself had become involved in the water station program. Once a month, he and a group of volunteers would go out into the desert and refill large water containers marked with blue flags. They'd saved several lives already. People found wandering disoriented on the brink of death, just like Maria had been. His ranching business had actually improved. The publicity, despite being controversial, had brought attention to his operation. He'd gotten contracts to supply beef to several restaurants in Tucson, who appreciated his story and wanted to support him. It wasn't about the money, but it helped offset some of the costs from the previous year's drama. Beverly had reconnected with most of her friends. The quilting circle had reformed, though with a few different members. The women had learned to avoid certain topics and focus on what brought them together rather than what divided them. On the anniversary of finding Maria, Tom did something he'd been planning for months. He rode out to the mesquite tree where he'd found her. He brought a simple wooden cross that he'd made in his workshop. On it, he'd carved the words, "Hope lives here." He planted the cross at the base of the tree and stood there for a long time, thinking about that day. The heat, the urgency, the helicopter, how close it had been. If he'd ridden out an hour later, Maria would have been dead. If Scout hadn't run off and barked, Tom might have ridden right past without seeing her. So many little things had to go exactly right for Maria to survive. Tom didn't consider himself a particularly religious man, but standing there in the desert, he felt the presence of something bigger than himself. Call it God, call it fate, call it luck. Something had orchestrated that rescue. He left flowers at the base of the cross, wild flowers he'd picked on the ride over. Then he mounted back up on Copper and headed home. That evening, he video called Maria. She showed him around the apartment, which looked more like a home now. The kids had decorated their room with posters and artwork. There were family photos on the walls. A sense of permanence. Maria had good news to share. She'd gotten promoted at one of her jobs. The house cleaning company she worked for had made her a supervisor. It meant better pay and more stable hours. She'd also enrolled in night classes to improve her English and eventually get a better job. "The kids are doing so good," Maria said proudly. "Elena got award at school for best essay. And Carlos, his team won the championship." "That's wonderful," Tom said. "You should be very proud. You've built a good life for them." "Because of you," Maria said, her voice emotional. "You give me second chance. Without you, I am dead in desert. My children are orphans. You change everything." "You did the hard part," Tom replied. "You survived. You fought. You built this new life. That's all you." They talked for over an hour, catching up on everything. Beverly joined the call, asking about the kids' school and Maria's work. They'd become genuine friends, these people from completely different worlds brought together by extraordinary circumstances. After the call, Tom sat on his porch with Beverly. It was a clear night, the stars brilliant against the black sky. Scout lay at their feet, sleeping peacefully. "Do you ever regret it?" Beverly asked. "Not saving her. I know you'd do that again, but everything that came after. The controversy, losing friends, all of it." Tom thought about it carefully. "No," he finally said. "I don't regret it. It was hard and I wish some things had gone differently, but that woman is alive. She's with her kids. They're safe. They're building a life. How can I regret that? Some people never understand what you did. That's okay. I'm not trying to convince everyone. I just did what I felt was right in that moment. If I had to do it over, I'd make the same choice." Beverly took his hand. "That's why I love you. You have a good heart." In the months that followed, Tom's life returned to a more normal rhythm. He wasn't in the news anymore. People had moved on to other controversies. But the impact of that day in the desert continued to ripple outward. The water station program had expanded to 3 other ranches. Fewer people were dying in the desert. Not none, but fewer. Every life saved was a victory. Tom had started mentoring young ranchers, teaching them not just about cattle and land management, but about being good neighbors and good humans. This land demands respect, he'd tell them. And that includes respecting the people who cross it, even when they're not supposed to be here. He'd also gotten involved in local discussions about immigration reform, not as an activist, but as someone with first-hand experience. He testified before state legislators, sharing his perspective as a border rancher who cared about both security and humanity. Build better legal pathways, he'd tell them. Make it easier for people to come here the right way.